You're not a competition with either yourself or the group. So it's not like you're playing a game to win.
Welcome to the International Institute for Facilitation's podcast, Spaghetti on the Wall. I'm Eileen Dowse, Chair Emeritus and Director of Certification for INIFAC. And today, you can see by his background, I am going to talk to the founder of Facilitator Café. I even brought like my coffee mug because I figure maybe we'll have a coffee chat here. Kevin Watson. And we're going to talk about managing your facilitator ego. It's not about you. So welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Eileen. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah. Kevin, when I am teaching facilitation, I tell people, I want you to remember as a facilitator, you are the least important person in the room. So leave your ego at the door. And if we're going to be talking about managing a facilitator's ego, what are some of your thoughts that you have found in that it's not about you?
Well, I think first important to say that it's quite natural behavior, I think, to allow your ego to get in the way. And it is ego. I'm thinking, is it always ego? It might just be that you've got an idea that you want to present to someone, or you might have already worked through the problem that the group are
Yeah.
struggling with or have a challenge with. You already might see a way through that you allow to impact, I guess, the questions and your behavior as to how they might go through. And that might be just as much about you wanting to genuinely help people. So those people that are really people pleasers, nurturers that want to help people, they also need to kind of get out of the way and allow people to think for themselves and contribute to themselves. So it's not, for me, it's not always about ego or the common language we might think about ego as someone who thinks a lot of themselves. It might just
Mm.
genuinely be a deep-rooted need to help our fellow humans in many ways. And so it's quite a challenge and hard for us to stop that because we're always making judgments and thinking about um, in our own schema, our own way of being, how we're going to help the people that are in front of us. And it's
Yeah.
not always about that. So.
Right. Um, Thank you. And you're not going to be pleased with this next point. I just know it. So I'm warning you early. Uh,
Brilliant.
uh, so I want to get a little academic on you here. And I was doing some research on egos, and I found that there are three kinds of egos. So I hear you when you say, is it ego, is it not ego, and you have to park it. But if we want to drill down to ego, Sigmund Freud says ego mediates the primal desire or moral standards, and I think you talked about that helping, and the reality around us. So that's ego from the Freud perspective. From the Carl Jung perspective, it's how we see ourselves and how we want others to see us, which I thought was quite interesting too, because as a facilitator, you want to be respected, you want to be trusted. And then in 2017, so more earlier, Jean Twinge, I believe, is his or her name, I don't know. The ego becomes a performer under a never ending and changing review. So both Young and Twinge seem to have this protecting of self component. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I kind of like that one. I like the one at the end actually, and forgive me, I'm not an academic,
No.
so
And like I
so
said, I knew you
the
wouldn't be thrilled.
definition of ego is probably just based on my own belief in what ego means, rather than
Yeah.
what it actually means. But I think there's something about us, generally want to step up with the people that are around us.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily about facilitation, want to be respected. I think as humans, we often are programmed from a very young age to want to be liked and want to be part of the crowd as well. So from a facilitation point of view, that brings its challenges that if you you strive to be liked, and strive to be part of the herd, then you're going to be less effective in challenging
Yeah.
the group and the group think as well as the individual think. So I think that you brought up three very good definitions, which I'll definitely make a note of actually after the session, because
I'll
they
send it to
challenge
you
my
after
thinking of
this
ego for sure.
podcast. I think you're really onto something here with being part of the group, which is which is tough because here you are working with this group of people, and really you're as a facilitator in a way, you're an outsider holding the space, right? And I've
Mm.
had facilitations that the group has worked me so hard. And at the end of the day, I'm like splattered against the wall, right? Exhausted. And the group is like, whoa, we're really good. We really accomplished a lot today. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah. And I had nothing to do with it, right?
Yeah.
So making that separation and keeping that separation in your mind is not easy, yet so important.
Mm. You made me think about when I was a leader in retail, which I was for many years. I don't know who told me this or gave me this sage advice, but they said your role is to make yourself redundant. And in some ways, I carry that forward to the coaching work that I do and also the facilitation is my role is not to be, uh, not for me to breed dependency for what I'm bringing. My
Beautiful.
role is to help them get to where they want to get to by providing them structure, but maybe structure they could use past my tenure and past the time I'm with them, which is a terrible business model when you think about it. But
That's true.
and really difficult for us to share with other people what we're doing because my intention will always be how might you facilitate yourself? How might you coach yourselves in your challenges? Here are
Mm-hmm.
some tools. If you notice what I'm doing, I'm quite happy to share what they are. Then you might be able to help yourself. It doesn't mean you're never reliant on a external facilitator, an
Right.
outsider, as you say.
Yeah.
But it may help them in the long term with working just in their meetings because we're never going to be around all the time, right? Unless you're internal facilitator attached to a team. So I
Yeah.
think there's that many of them.
Um, Now to get non-academic on you, so a little bit easier here. I was exactly. I was chatting with a group of facilitators, and we were talking about who makes the better facilitator, an extrovert who gets their energy from others, using that definition, or an introvert, right? Who's more internal. And it was sort of determined that a lot of facilitators are extroverts, and in fact, they're not. They have greater challenges, much like we're talking about, because they're pulling energy from the group and not their role. And the introvert who is holding it all and throwing it back out. It
Yeah.
was a great discussion, and it was one of those aha moments. It's like, yeah, there are some people who facilitate, and this is kind of the ugly truth about this is I want to be in go and facilitate, and you'll see how great I am, and you'll see how wonderful I am, and I get you all excited, and I feel great after a facilitation. And I'm like, you do? Wow, because I am like, I mean, I come home and my husband goes, hey, what do you need? And I say, what I need is I don't need to listen to you, and I'm sure in the heck not going to validate you. Right? So I need some space.
It's an interesting question or interesting thought. Which one's the extrovert, which one's the introvert, which one's better? I suspect that the answer is somewhere in between in that label that's been coined in the last 5, 6 years
Right.
in context of MBTI. I think is ambivert, and I think that there's a you get energy off of people in the moment in that dance. If you're getting energy off of people, the extrovert that does, then you're able to respond perhaps in a more spontaneous way than a typical introvert might do, who's more thoughtful and reflective. And there's still space for both of those introverts and extroverts. I think the introvert, I would agree, the someone that isn't putting themselves forward in the limelight. The third definition you gave me earlier, you talked about either performer or performance. I can't remember which word you used, but that's what a lot of facilitators that maybe are externally driven, extroverted, may seek to perform. But the problem is, because we're in extrovert world, the world has been built by extroverts.
Mm.
Introverts often feel high pressure and a need to perform, and therefore aren't necessarily as good as they could be by stepping back and structure and allowing the space that an introvert might more naturally do. Does that make sense? So I think there's things that can be learned from both, and that middle line, I think the ambivert, where you can gain energy but also need that time for reflection yourself and space. I know that I fall. I wouldn't necessarily claim myself as an ambivert. I think the older I get, I'm probably more introvert than extrovert. I've never been extrovert fully, but I've been on the cusp
Yeah.
and equally happy to live in both worlds for a limited amount of time.
I haven't
Yeah.
heard that term, and I like it because I
Mm,
know how to perform, not I'll say perform. I know how to present as an extrovert. That's probably a better word. And yet my happy place is as an introvert,
mm,
right?
mm.
So,
Well, one of the things that stopped me presenting myself as an extrovert was the being brought up as to never never boast and shine too brightly. And it
mm,
was, I don't know whether you've come across Marianne Williamson's poem, What is Your Deepest Fear? But that poem changed my practice as a facilitator,
wow.
is not to perform, but allow others to see you, to allow your light to shine through for other people
Mm,
so that it gave them permission to share their own light. And so when you think about facilitation, it's about getting other people to contribute, other people to step into the light where they may not be too comfortable.
oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
unless you can do that, unless you can model that, not as someone that's singing and dancing, but someone who is comfortable in their own skin,
Mm,
comfortable in their own abilities, and is able to proudly say, I'm good at this.
yeah.
Unless you can do that, you're not necessarily going to give license for other people to speak.
Right. Wow. Like, absolutely. Ditto, ditto, ditto. I just, I think that is really, really profound. That
Mm,
let it goes back to creating that space, right? To let people get there. And that is so much about building that trust. You can call it psychological safety, make them feel safe, whatever term you want to use. and and help them do that. And for me, sometimes it means you have to model that,
mm,
right? So you
yeah.
can't just stand there like a doorknob and hold the space. You have to engage, right? Yet for me, it comes back to what's your ultimate goal?
Mm,
Is it to, get kudos or be perceived well? And we always want that, right? Who wants to have bad evaluations on a facilitation?
mm,
Yet, how are you serving this group?
mm. I did some work as a guest lecturer at the local university where I live in South Wales. And I was invited in after doing some lectures to students, lectures being workshopping, not lectures, because that's not me. But I was asked to come in and help the tutors be more coach-like, be more facilitative.
Mm,
And I was struck by a couple of things. One, how outdated their thinking was in the
mm,
subjects that they were tutoring, but how misguided they were in giving lots of information to the students rather than helping them to think better,
mm,
to have a better quality of thinking. And the driver from that was the satisfaction scores they were receiving. If they didn't get high satisfaction scores, they would be, in trouble for, they wouldn't get a pay increase, all that kind of stuff.
mm,
And so they overcompensated by teaching the students rather than facilitating their learning, which at university level I was always understood. I never went to university. I always understood was that's where you learnt, not what you were taught. And that these tutors weren't doing that, which is a real shame. But it was driven by, and the same thing with facilitation. You're right. If we are driven by a need to get great satisfaction scores at the end of our session and get lovely happy sheets coming through, you might behave a little differently than,
Yeah.
be really confrontational to someone or the group.
Yeah.
That where that could be really transformational in their thinking
Uh,
by then.
Absolutely. I feel really good from this meeting versus we accomplished a lot in this meeting
Yeah,
together as a group,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it is such a dance that I think that facilitators have to do, right? Where you have to present yourself well, have that mindset to present, and yet be willing to let the people be and pull out their egos where there's a lot of egos in the room sometimes when
yeah,
you're
yeah,
facilitating.
yeah. I think we having connected last week. I think you've got a measure of me that I don't like to plan for things.
Yeah.
So of course I plan enough when I'm with a client, and I um, don't, in a bad way, give the illusion I planned more, but I want them to think that I really planned because they expect me to know stuff. They even send me details about all the participants, maybe that are in the session, for example. I never read it because if I do that, it plants preconceived ideas and assumptions in my mind that will be difficult for me to get out of the way. So I want to make my own or have my own thoughts, not judgments, but thoughts about the people who are in the room so that I can use, hopefully, my facilitation skills to bring the best out of them and best out of the group.
Right.
And in order to do that, I first came across this phrase when I was a coach. It's really important for me to dance in the moment, not to
Mm.
plan how I'm going to dance,
Right.
and be responsive. And the best learning I ever had to be a facilitator was theatre improvisation, not how to be a facilitator, but how to be generative in your dialogue,
Yeah.
how to pivot and deal with any situation that comes at you
Mm.
in a way that generates greater thought rather than shuts the thought down. And I think that's a key skill, not just facilitators, by the way. I think leaders in organizations do some theatre
Right.
improv, but it's that dancing in the moment I think is really important for me. And in order to do that, you do need to get out of your own way because most people will want to prepare and plan to the nth degree, particularly those that are new into it. And of course, it's okay. I'm not decrying that. That's okay
Mm.
for many, many people. They need that. But I wonder sometimes whether that planning gets in the way because the facilitator that plans to that extent will think, I've got to get them through this next 5 minutes because at 3:30, I've got this
Uh,
thing I need to be doing rather than where are the group now? How do I guide them through to the next
I've
place they need
seen,
to be
yeah,
rather than where I want them to be?
I've seen a facilitator do that and infuriate the group because
Mm,
they wanted to talk, this is an executive group and they wanted to talk about this, which was important, and the facilitator was like, no, we need to move on now, and it was like, oh brother, don't do that. And
mm,
also, while you were talking, something came to my mind that I think there's an important piece here to remember about biases,
mm,
that biases are part of this ego bit, that if I park you in a category and I'm biased against that, that's going to protect me, yet at the same time it's not going to help me, to your point, pivot and be open. And so I think as facilitators we need to watch our biases,
mm,
uh, and
totally.
unconscious biases as well, which is hard to detect.
Mm,
They're there.
totally. Totally. I think it's something about, again, I was chatting with someone earlier today about this as well, is the time that I've been least effective as a facilitator was when I facilitated groups of retailers. because my bias is I know more about retail than
Mm,
they might think when they're talking, and therefore I'm constructing structures and questions and ways of behaving that are being determined by my bias of being reasonably good at retail,
right.
and will have already started to problem solve because all of us have got this computer in our heads that as soon as we start hearing any problem, regardless of whether we know the content that they're talking about, we'll start to, because of our love of structures, that
Yeah,
almost engineering mind that facilitators, great facilitators have, is we're already starting to solve the problem for them. And
right.
again, that bias will get in the way. I think it's quite a natural one to have. So you're right. The bias is our biggest enemy, really. It's their assumptions we make.
And sometimes I just want to shake them and say, don't you see what you need to do here? Like, come
Yeah,
on!
yeah, yeah,
It's so clear to me. What are you doing?
yeah, yeah,
And they don't
yeah.
get it. And
No,
and so and even with that, you have to, there are ways to get around that and
yeah, totally.
appropriate
I,
questions to
I,
ask
I
to
do.
them.
I sorry to interrupt you there. I do have
Mm,
to watch myself because I have a reasonable. I mean, the way I think, whether it's an ability or not, I'm not sure. The way I perceive things are often in patterns rather than the detail of, and therefore I can already work out
mm.
the pattern of where this will go or should go for many of the people I facilitate. I have to work hard to get rid of that because I do have that moment sometimes going, God, this is so bleeding obvious where you should be.
That's right.
You know,
That's
why
right.
why haven't you got there yet? Why
Yeah.
haven't you come to this conclusion yet? What's stopping you?
You look smarter than this. Why aren't you why
Yeah,
aren't you
yeah.
solving it?
Why can I see something that you're so blind to?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it doesn't
Um,
help.
we need to put a bow on this, wrap it up. When when you think about this topic about managing facilitator ego, it's not about you. What final words of wisdom, pearls, or just aha moments can you
Yeah.
share?
Well, I think apart from the one I mentioned about Marion Williamson, which was an aha moment for me, I think that
Yeah.
there's something about competition that you're not in competition with either yourself or the group. So
Mm,
it's not like you're playing a game to win. Your game is to keep them thinking afterwards, not just a complete
mm,
session. So there's something about that infinite gameplay which I believe helps and can help facilitators so that they can step away and be on the outside
mm.
and not many. There's one co-facilitator, but there are many more that I've worked with that feel invested in the outcomes themselves and therefore want to follow up, not commercially, but just because they really want to know what's happened. And it sometimes I think can hinder you if you go in with that space that I mean I'm competing to be the great facilitator. I'm competing with the group to be this person that's respected or whatever it might be. I think that competition is about how do you keep them going past your tenure and you're not invested in it.
Wow. That's a whole other topic. Yes, 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 and yes. Kevin, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom. And how could people, let's do a little plug for Facilitators Cafe. How can people connect and join and be part of?
Yeah, the website facilitatorscafe.co.uk, Substack facilitatorscafe.substack.com are two great places to have a look. But we have events every month as well, free events every month. There's an events page on the website. You can have a look at that and come and join us and
Okay.
talk about similar topics, similar subjects to what we're doing here.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin.
Thank you so much.